Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the kickoff session for the ASCENDxSummit National Security Track. I'm Toby Jackson, and I'm an event program executive for AIAA, and I'm excited to welcome you all here. Several housekeeping announcements this morning as we start the track. Our speakers today in this track will be happy to take audience questions. You can ask a question by placing it in the chat below the viewing window. You may have to scroll up a little and click on View Chat to be able to do so. Also, today's sessions are being recorded and will be available on demand online. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce today's kickoff speaker, Major General Kimberly Kreider. General Kreider is currently the Mobilization Assistant to the Chief of Space Operations for the United States Space Force. This means that she assists the Chief of Space Operations in organizing, training, equipping, and maintaining space forces. She also develops strategy, plans, and concepts of operations. And if that weren't enough, she is also the Acting Chief Innovation Officer and Chief Technology Officer for the United States Space Force. Some of the details that you won't find in her bio: she has a broad background that includes positions in both the active duty Air Force and the reserves in acquisition, communications, and networks, and was the Air Force Chief Data Officer. In addition, she had a long systems engineering career with MITRE and is also a successful entrepreneur running her own businesses in IT consulting and leadership and development. I'm sure all of these skills that she learned from these roles will factor into her current role within the Space Force. I'm excited to hear her perspectives on next generation space. Please join me in giving a warm virtual welcome to Major General Kreider.
Thank you so much, Toby, and thank you to the Ascend team for having me here today. It's really a pleasure to be able to talk to you and really kick this series off today with a discussion about next generation space and where we see ourselves headed. Well, I'll tell you, the United States Space Force has really taken off like a rocket. We were born on the 20th of December 2019, and in the last 6 months, we have just been moving out very quickly. I'm sure many of you have been tracking what we've been doing and keeping up with all of the news that's been happening in this domain. There's never been a more exciting time to be in the space business and to be part of the Space Force. As Toby mentioned, I've been affiliated with the Air Force and now the Space Force for well over some 30 years, both as a active duty officer and a reservist and a contractor working for the MITRE Corporation. You'll note from my duty title that I am in fact still an Air Force member. I'm an Air Force reservist supporting space missions, but really very much a member of the Space Force team, as are all of our reservists. We in the Space Force depend on the reserves across all of our mission areas. Both the Guard and Reserve contribute to every mission in space, and that will continue to be the case as the Space Force continues to stand up. And I'll tell you, when we talk about next generation space, a lot of it has to do with building the talent that we need and ensuring that across both active duty, Guard, and Reserve, we focus on ensuring that we're building that next generation talent, the key capabilities that we need, particularly in the area of technology and innovation. Joe Raymond, as he has launched the Space Force, has been very focused on the idea of a digital Space Force and ensuring that as we build the Space Force from the beginning, that we are in fact thinking of ourselves as born digital by design, because we know that in order to be able to be successful in defeating our adversaries and ensuring freedom of access, freedom of maneuver, the ability to ensure capabilities from space are always available, we've got to be able to leverage modern technologies and ensure access to data and analytics so that we can understand the domain, rapid development of software-driven capabilities, the ability to engage our operators continuously to continue to refine the capabilities that they need, and to bring next generation technologies out of our research and development labs into operations as quickly as possible. So because of that charge that General Raymond has given us to be more in digital, we're very focused from a digital standpoint on building the skill sets of all of our space professionals and providing access to the knowledge and capabilities that are available today that we can garner from online learning platforms across a variety of competencies. I mentioned software development, data and analytics, modern product development methods such as agile, user-centered design, cybersecurity, fundamentally critical to space operations, and of course infrastructure and next generation wireless capabilities and software-defined networks. These are the kinds of skill sets that we need to develop across our workforce. And we're making those skill sets available through, as again, online learning platforms such as the Air Force's Digital University initiative. So building that next generation space has a lot to do with building our talent base and getting all of our space professionals ready to go and ready to support in each of these competency areas. But let me take a minute and step back and talk a little bit about the Space Force overall. I'm sure you've read about many of the things that we've been standing up, and of course, the things that have been coming out recently in the Space Force is we've been organizing ourselves into the new service. It's been a large part of our effort. We've recently stood up our space deltas and stood down what were our space wings. So on the active duty side, we now have 9 space deltas that have been stood up and are focused on each of our space mission areas. And it's within those space deltas that the space professionals that I was talking about, both active and then reserve associations, Guard and Reserve associations, will continue to focus their efforts on ensuring freedom of action and the availability of services in, from, and through space. So the stand-up of the 9 deltas is a precursor to the stand-up of the field commands. And so you may have read also in the news that we have 3 field commands that are standing up. The Space Operations Command is responsible for organizing, training, and equipping our forces, and will have the predominant responsibility for organizing, training, and equipping those deltas that I just mentioned. We have STARCOM standing up, the Space Training and Readiness Command. And in fact, one of the space deltas is the STARCOM provisional. So while we go through the process of standing up a brand new field command focused on training and readiness, wargaming, test and evaluation, we have a smaller unit, a seed unit, if you will, that is the STAR Delta. That is the precursor for the stand-up of that field command that we expect to have happen here in the next several months and into FY21. And then we have the stand-up of Space Systems Command. This will be the evolution of Space and Missiles Center into a full field command focused on acquisition and engineering. We also have our labs that will be aligned up under Space Systems Command, Air Force Research Labs, and our relationship with Air Force Research Lab will be aligned under Space Systems Command. We have our Space Rapid Capabilities Office that will be aligned under Space Systems Command. And the new thing that is being brought under that command is the Launch Enterprise. So you're familiar with the launch wings that exist today at Vandenberg and Patrick Air Force Base. Those wings will be redesignated as deltas. And we will have launch deltas that will be aligned under the Space Systems Command and the Launch Enterprise. The assured access to space will be part of Space Systems Command. So those field commands are standing up and the deltas have stood up. We also have the establishment of garrison commands. That is our installation commands that are standing up. 2 have been established, the Peterson-Schriever Garrison, as well as the Buckley Garrison, responsible for providing installation support to those deltas. And then we'll see another garrison command stand up with Space Systems Command as it comes into being, and that will be the LA Garrison. So lots of exciting organizational changes, some exciting changes on the workforce front that I've mentioned. And all of this, again, is to prep ourselves to continue to be at the forefront of delivering our mission capabilities to the warfighters, to U.S. Space Command, and to all of the warfighters that depend upon space capabilities. The other thing that's come out recently that's related to next generation space that you can read about is the release of the Space Capstone publication. Our first space doctrine publication has just been released. And in this doctrine, it really emphasizes the importance of space power. Space power as an engine of national power and how we as a nation will leverage space in providing not just capabilities, but independent options for combatant commanders. And so it's the recognition that is clarified in this document, articulated in the Capstone document, that space in and of itself, similar to air power, land power, sea power, and cyber power, is a distinct form of national power and really requires unity of effort and unified action. So that's another important development that's recently occurred. And I encourage you to go ahead and Google our Space Capstone publication and take a look at that. I also wanted to spend a little bit of time today talking about what's happening in the technology and innovation area writ large for space. You know, when we think about our S&D and R&D portfolio for space, we've never been at a more critical time. And I know many of you are strong contributors to our technology, our industry base we rely on so heavily for helping us think through new concepts and ideas and exploring new ways to apply technology to create competitive advantage for space. And Joe Raymond would say that from his perspective, from a science and technology research and development standpoint, it's all about getting ahead and staying ahead of our threats in space. And that's where our focus has really been. Getting ahead is about being agile, embracing innovation, evolving our systems to be more resilient, and filling gaps that we see today. It's about game-changing capabilities and being able to leverage technologies in ways that will give us significant competitive advantage, to reinvent the way in which we can apply our space assets in support of our warfighting missions. Staying ahead means that we need to continue to invest in both those revolutionary technologies, those game changers, and the enhancements that we need to make to our current capabilities so that we can always have the cutting edge. We need to do this through a careful and strategic prioritization of the limited resources that we have. And so within my portfolio as the Acting Chief Technology and Innovation Office, my responsibility is to work with our chief scientists, to work with our S&T community, our research and development community, ensure we have an effective strategy for the kinds of technologies that we need and how we can leverage our technology base and our partners in government, in academia, and in industry to deliver the capabilities that we need across the spectrum of space technology areas. Launch, space vehicles, payloads, sensors, communication systems for all of our mission areas. Where we've been focusing our effort to date in some of these areas, as we build out our S&T, R&D strategy and roadmap, we really are spending quite a bit of time with industry and with our academic partners and our lab partners, thinking about the future of space all the way out to 2060 and back into the near term. Many of you may be very familiar with the Space Futures report that was done last year, led by our chief scientist, Dr. Joel Mosier, that really focused on the future of space. And it really did, in fact, look out to 2060, considered 8 different scenarios for US national power. Some were positive and some were negative scenarios. And those scenarios were considered against 3 different axes: the future economic conditions in space, how commercial industry will continue to leverage space as a source of economic advantage and economic power, and the kinds of wealth streams that may continue to develop in space well into the future. The prevalence of humans in space in the future, and how that might factor into a future scenario for space, and what that might look like as we consider whether or not there will be more humans in space. And then finally, leadership in space and the role of nations from a geopolitical standpoint, the influence that nations will have in being able to optimize the use of space. And trying to answer the question, will the US and its allies or our strategic competitors really have a lead in policy, infrastructure, and the use of technology as it relates to space? The whole idea of this futures study that was done last year was to really help frame the decisions that we need to make relative to space as a source of national power, and to emphasize that the nation that can best organize and operate in space can in fact exploit its potential. And so that future study really gave us a framework to think about the long-term challenges and the long-term opportunities we have for space, which we're considering as we build in our S&T and our R&D roadmap today. And we think about the kinds of capabilities not only that we have, but that we need to continue to strive to develop and bring into our architectures. Another important science and technology initiative that involves our relationships and our partnerships with industry and academia has been the Space Industrial Base Report. That also has been an effort that we've been engaged on in the last several months, and recently pulled together a workshop this past July, in fact, with over 120 subject matter experts to look at the state of the space industrial base and coordinate with industry and other government leaders what government and industry really need to do to continue to ensure the capabilities that we need in space will in fact be developed. This report is also available to you out on the web, and you can take a look at it. But the whole goal of this effort in looking at the space industrial base is ensuring that we have a strong industry base and that we can influence policy effectively with our government leaders to ensure the capabilities that we need. Focusing on building unity of effort across government, industry, and academia to incentivize that industry base, emphasizing the enhancement of space communications and PNT that we all rely upon, not just the military, but in our civil lives as well, so dependent on those capabilities. Improving space transport and logistics, developing systems for human space flight, as we think about, again, in those future scenarios where humans space flight and human in space may continue to grow. Building efficient power, the use of power or power in space, from space, a very important technology area, and important for us to continue to look to our industry base at ways to develop the ability to leverage power in and from space. So these are some of the things that the Space Industrial Base workshop took a look at, and that we've been taking a look at as a result of that report to build into our S&T strategies and our research and development efforts. Toby introduced me today as the Acting Chief Technology and Innovation Officer. In fact, I am acting in that role, but I'll tell you a little bit about this office, because this office is another important innovation in and of itself for the Space Force as it's been standing up. With the kind of next generation space capabilities that we need, the kinds of things that I've talked about here relative to our partnership with industry, we know that this service needs to have a clear focus and be a thought leader in technology and innovation. And because of that, Joe Raymond has established a direct reporting organization that would report to him at the headquarters staff here at the Pentagon, the Chief Technology and Innovation Office. This office would be on par with our S1, our S236, and our S589 organizations. So one of the level 2 organizations reporting directly to the Chief of Space Operations. The focus of the Chief Technology and Innovation Office is really the complete spectrum of science and technology, early research and development, all the way through to guiding the high TRL level transition and acquisition of capabilities, working very closely with our Strategy and Resources Organization and our Space Systems Command for the implementation and the acquisition of technologies. Digital transformation, I mentioned digital workforce and leveraging online digital platforms early on in the development of our next generation space talent base. But all aspects of digital transformation is we really look to our Space Force from a born digital standpoint and ensuring that we are leveraging digital technologies across all of our operations and mission areas, that we're streamlining our operations with data and access to analytics and applied automation on the ground and in orbit as needed to ensure that we can understand our domain more completely. We can understand threats to our domain through space domain awareness. We can access data about the domain more readily and all domain access more effectively, and integrate that data to assure space command and control and battle management, as well as underpin the whole capability of joint all domain operations. Really begins in space. So digital transformation in that regard is a key function of the CTIO, as well as within our business functions. Another important aspect as we stand up this organization and we focus on digital capabilities is digitizing our headquarters processes all the way down to the Delta level, providing access to readiness data, being able to predict and plan our readiness capabilities much more effectively, being able to streamline and maintain continuous options for ourselves relative to investment planning and POM planning on a continuous basis, because we can readily access data about our requirements and our cost factors and capability needs that we have, so that we can continuously evaluate where we need to invest and how we need to assure our readiness. So looking at our headquarters processes and figuring out ways to innovate those with the use of data and analysis and automation are other key aspects of our digital transformation initiative. And then finally, IT infrastructure. We as a Space Force rely on IT just as much as anybody else. And as a member of the Department of the Air Force, as a service within the Department of the Air Force, we'll continue to work with and partner with our Air Force CIO and our Department of the Air Force Chief Data Officer to ensure we have the infrastructure that we need, the transport layer, communications on the ground, and the kinds of wireless capabilities that we need to ensure that any of our space professionals, wherever they may be, can access the information that they require with the appropriate level of security built in. So those are some of the areas that the Chief Technology and Innovation Office will be responsible for as it stands up. And over the course of the next several months, we'll be building this organization out just as we are the rest of the space staff. And we'll be installing an SES to lead this organization. My responsibility is to help get this organization stood up. I've covered quite a bit, and hopefully I've answered perhaps some of your questions that you may have, but maybe Toby, we have a chance for some additional questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And so for those of you watching, I would encourage you to ask your questions within the chat box. Again, if you can't see that chat box, you'll need to scroll up above the video window and click on Track 5 Chat to see that. So General Kreider, quickly, Space Force was established in December, but why now? Why is the Space Force important? Why is this a timely development or a timely stand-up of a new branch of service?
Thank you for that question, Toby. There's been a growing need for more of a focus on space, with the recognition that space not only is vital to our way of war, our war fighting, our national security, it's vital to our economy and our everyday life. But the fact of the matter is that space is threatened. It's contested, it's congested, there's many more players that are delivering capabilities into space. And with all of that going on, it's a much more diverse, dangerous, and disorienting environment. So our national government, all the way up to the administration, has determined that we really need to focus on space as a domain unto itself. And we need to be able to have a central focus on our ability to protect our freedom of maneuver in space, our freedom of action in, from, and through space. We need to be able to support warfighting operations in space. We need to deliver space power as an independent option to our commanders. So with that emphasis that's been growing for quite some time, we've seen the stand up of United States Space Command, the force employment arm for conducting operations in, from, and through space, and now the service, United States Space Force, fully responsible and focused on organizing, training, and equipping forces to be able to employ our missions in this very critical domain.
Great, thank you. So appreciate you mentioning Space Command, as you did earlier. So you know that we have, following your remarks, we have a session on myths about the Space Force and Space Command. But what are the most common myths that you hear about Space Force and Space Command, and can you address those?
Well, there's certainly the myth that we don't need these two things, and hopefully I've helped to dispel that a little bit in my previous comments, because in fact, it's been proven time and time again, and we can see it even in the news today, that there are adversaries that would in fact seek to disrupt our ability to leverage space the way we need to. There's certainly the myth that U.S. Space Command can continue to function as a smaller entity, and perhaps not need to be as prominent as it would be. And that is absolutely a myth. More and more we've seen how commanders across all the combatant commands rely on space. Space is central, as I mentioned, to joint all-domain operations. You cannot do joint domain operations without space, and space cannot function without information and access to information from other domains. So it's critical to everything we do. It's a central and prominent command, and we have a service that is now critically responsible for delivering capabilities to that command. They go hand in hand.
Perfect, thank you. So you just mentioned joint all-domain operations, and sometimes we hear about JADC2 or a joint all-domain command and control. Can you tell us a little bit more about that concept and what that means for those that might not understand that?
Right. Thank you, Toby. So yeah, joint all-domain operations, joint all-domain command and control, really the joint staff recognizes the need for joint all-domain C2 as a key concept within its joint warfighting concepts. The idea that combatant commanders need to be able to access information from any domain, quickly integrate that information to be able to develop insights and options for command and control decision makers at the speed of war. Warfighting operations have continued to accelerate, and in order for us to maintain a competitive advantage against our thinking adversaries and our peer adversaries, we absolutely have to be able to optimize any sensors, information across any single domain: air, ground, sea, space, cyber, maritime, submaritime, and be able to quickly pull that information in via sensor grid, be able to leverage that information through a variety of analytics on a variety of applications, and rapidly get that information and the decisions associated with that information to the warfighters that need to take action on it. So Joint All-Domain C2 is a concept that we can actually act upon today through some of the capabilities, the technologies that are readily available. And we see the Department of the Air Force working very closely with its joint partners, Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and Air Force and Space Force within the department under the all-domain umbrella as part of the Advanced Battle Management System of Capabilities, ABMS. ABMS being a system of systems to really implement Joint All-Domain C2, and space being a critical component of that.
Wonderful, thank you. I love how we have lots of acronyms. So question from our audience, from David. He asks, can you please discuss the direction for propulsion systems, specifically to future satellites and orbital debris removal?
Well, propulsion is absolutely a key area that we are looking to our industry base, to our partners in the labs, government labs, and academic labs to continue to help us advance. The ability to accelerate how we access space and to leverage propulsion technologies in ways that would allow us to deal with debris in space more effectively is something that we need to continue to focus on. Debris is a real challenge, and we've got to be able to clarify what is debris, what's not debris. We've got to be able to maneuver our way through debris fields effectively, and we've got to be able to get into the orbits where we need to operate and be able to maneuver in those orbits to deal with the various factors that may affect any of our space assets. So critical technologies, areas that we need to continue to focus on to ensure the resilience of our space capabilities.
Great, thank you. So switching gears a little bit and talking a little bit about your background in acquisition. James asks, my experience with technology transfer and fundraising from the U.S. Armed Forces in general is that it's slow, inflexible, and very difficult for new players to get into the tracks. How will the Space Force speed up technology development and create more opportunities for entrepreneurs to get started without a 20-year career in defense?
It's a great question, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this because there's a lot going on here. One of the areas that the Space Force was asked to take a look at from the very start is accelerating acquisition. And so there's a lot of work that's been going on within the acquisition community with the establishment of a acquisition executive focused on space and how can we accelerate our overall acquisition timelines to design, develop, and deliver capabilities more quickly and more effectively. Some of the specific things that relate to this that will be improvements in this area are the use of digital technologies in the case of digital engineering. Joe Raymond and the space leaders have fully embraced how digital engineering will be able to help us accelerate our design and our acquisition of space by ensuring that we use model-based systems engineering architectures to fully represent the space capabilities that we need in digital models, that we can run those models in environments against digital threats, representations of the threat, so red models, blue models against red, and then our industry partners can provide digital twins that we can use to understand how the solutions that industry is bringing to bear will be able to perform in the environments where we need them to operate against those kinds of threats. So the use of digital engineering will give us the ability ultimately to accelerate, we believe, the acquisition of capabilities, because we'll have a full representation of those needs, and we'll be able to quickly assess and evaluate and make decisions about the kinds of changes that we need as those solutions are being developed. That's going to be one way that we're going to accelerate our acquisition process. Another way is through the use of a variety of mechanisms that many of you may have participated in already. Space pitch days, Air Force ventures and space ventures, SBIRS venues that allow small businesses and entrepreneurs to be able to present and pitch their ideas for new technologies, new ideas, perhaps even bringing those ideas in a digital form into the digital engineering environment that I just talked about as part of their overall pitch, and quickly being able to evaluate what that capability can bring. And then being able to quickly make contract arrangements with those winning providers, and being able to quickly get on contract to start to deliver those capabilities in a rapid, agile fashion, evolving those capabilities over time, working as part of our overall accelerator community. And we've got lots of accelerator activities underway in space already. We've been doing them for quite some time, and they'll only continue to expand under the new Space Force organizational structure. But we've got an accelerator at Catalyst Campus out in Colorado Springs. We've got accelerator activities out in LA. We've got accelerator activities that we're leveraging from other industry consortiums and academic partners. And so participating in the development of capability through these accelerator venues, coming into our space camp software factory that is working very closely with our unit level innovation efforts, are all ways that small business entrepreneurs can bring their capabilities to the forefront, their new ideas, their new solutions into the space community, helping us think outside the box, helping us think of new ways to take advantage of new technologies against our critical challenges and problem sets.
Great, thank you. So you mentioned a couple of the initiatives that are underway. So for those individuals or startup organizations that may be watching right now, there are a number of different ways in which they could engage with the Space Force. What would you recommend? So what if they're sitting out there and they think, hey, I've got this great idea, I think it would be a natural fit. Or on the flip side, I really wonder what the big challenges are that I could help solve for either Space Force or the Air Force. What would you recommend that they do? What's the best place to start? I think you're on mute.
Okay. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. There's a lot of ways that small businesses can learn about the Space Force. Just by going out onto the web, we're publishing a lot of information, certainly through a variety of social media channels where you would get any business information about business with the government, business with the Air Force, business with the Space Force. From an overall technology standpoint, we'll be shortly publishing our 2020 long-term and short-term S&T challenges. So that will give a good framework for the areas that we're predominantly focused on right now for industry to consider working with us on. Engaging with our Space Systems Command Innovation Office very specifically. And they will be the ones that will orchestrate many of these space pitch days that I mentioned, and will be reaching out to industry and advertising when there will be opportunities to come in and participate in presenting ideas and topics for those kinds of capabilities. AFWorks publications and notifications. We will have continue to have a heavy space presence in the various AFWERX outreach efforts. We talked about multi-domain command and control, multi-domain operations, working with the Defense Innovation Unit, and looking for innovative providers of solutions that can address the needs for space from a joint all-domain perspective. So there will continue to be a variety of advertisements, publications, notifications that will go out to industry to ask for ideas and ask for small business, large business, medium-sized companies to bring their best ideas to the table, so that we can take a look at what you've got and you can help us solve some of our tough problems.
Perfect, thank you. So I know that in the virtual environment, sometimes it can be hard because you're not seeing feedback from the audience, but I wanted to let you know that James said thank you for your answer to his acquisition question. He truly appreciated it. So pulling on that JADC2 theme a little bit more, Bob asks, can you talk about your vision for the Space Force to be a data-centric enterprise, and how will that enable the JADC2 concept?
So data is fundamentally paramount to space operations. As you can imagine, everything we know about space and everything we're able to do in, from, and through space depends on our understanding of the domain and our ability to access data from the domain. I've said in many forums that we experience the space domain through the data that we get about it. So without data, we're pretty much blind to our operations and become very ineffective very quickly. So we've known that data has been critical to us for a long, long time. Over the last several years, we've had a very strong focus on pulling data off of all of our sensors, our space-based sensors, our ground-based sensors, radars and telescopes, into a single unified data environment we call the Unified Data Library. So registering all of our data sources for operational understanding of the domain, and then tagging and registering that data for access and specific information about how best to use that data and curating that data for operational use. So the Unified Data Library has been a foundational piece to our space architecture in support of all of our mission sets and critical to our command and control battle management capabilities. So much so that the Space Unified Data Library is a central piece to the Joint All-Domain C2 capability set that the Advanced Battle Management System that I mentioned earlier is providing. Unified Data Library is the centerpiece to the Data One capability within ABMS, recognized therefore as core to the ability to support Joint All-Domain C2. And in fact, that Data One capability centered on Unified Data Library currently today brings data from a variety of domains, not just space. There are a significant amount of space data assets available through the data library today, both military and commercial. Data sources can be accessed to authorized users, but ground-based sensors, airborne sensors, maritime sensors, and in fact, we're starting to bring cyber domain sensors and federation with cyber data environments into our overall Data One architecture and federated with the Unified Data Library for that all domain access as part of the overall ABMS effort. So data is key to space. It's critical to all domain operations. It's a centerpiece to it all. And we're continuing to invest in that quite heavily for our own space capabilities and partner with our joint all domain ABMS partners to ensure that those capabilities are available for the larger problem set.
Great, thank you. So switching gears just slightly, I know when Space Command was stood up and then also Space Force, there was some question about the interactivity and the relationship with the National Reconnaissance Office. So Ashton has a question for you. How do you envision the Space Force and the National Reconnaissance Office relationship being different than that of the Air Force NRO relationship? Specifically, perhaps you can address the areas of manning, systems development, operations, and space situational awareness.
Well, hopefully I can answer your question by saying that the relationship of the Space Force, the United States Space Force, and the National Reconnaissance Organization is an evolution of the relationship of the Air Force and the NRO. The Air Force and the NRO's relationship, in large measure, had been previously via Air Force Space Command. Now, with the establishment of the United States Space Force as an independent service under the Department of the Air Force, that relationship with NRO will be in large measure centered in the Space Force. And we will continue to have a now Space Force element to the NRO, so a two-star leading that Space Force element. Currently today, it's Major General Gutlein there at the NRO that coordinates all of the activity, all of the engagement, all of the partnering that we need to do with the NRO on an operational level, and participates in the overall future planning for capabilities that we need to see between the NRO and the Space Force. Lots of sharing of data, lots of collaboration on not only systems architectures and future capabilities, but data architectures, data sharing, sharing of analysis and analytics. Very important partner to us. And I would say that the relationship that we have with the NRO that's evolved over the years has never been better. It's a phenomenal relationship. We're actively partnering with the NRO every single day, of course, in our operations, as well as in our overall planning and strategies.
That makes sense, thanks. So going back to the acquisition discussion a little bit, there's a question from Alex regarding small business innovation research, so SBIR programs. So he asks, or Alex asks, is the Space Force going to get involved in the SBIR process as an individual entity like the Air Force or the Navy, or is the plan to continue to tie tightly into the Air Force or the AFWERX structure?
That's a great question. Right now, we are tied in tightly with the Department of the Air Force and certainly the AFWERX structure. A lot of great work's been going on in the Air Force and under Dr. Roper's leadership to really advance AFWERX and the SBIR construct within that. And we've been benefiting from that and taking advantage of that all along. So now, right now, as we stand up, we're going to continue to leverage that and stay tied into that. Over time, that may change. Over time, that may continue to grow. I certainly think that we will continue to be an active user of SBIRs and leverage AFWERX quite a bit. We may very well create a SpaceWorks subsidiary of AFWERX, but still build it on the AFWERX machinery that's already in place, because it is a phenomenal framework that we have to take advantage of. And wherever we can, just as sort of an aside, as the Space Force was established as a very small service, very focused on space operations and what we need to be able to support our missions in space, we are leveraging as much as we can from the Department of the Air Force and from our Air Force partners with regards to established frameworks, established support processes, established support functions to enable our capabilities. So the acquisition community writ large still at the secretariat level, certainly encompasses space acquisition. And therefore we will continue to leverage as much of that larger set of capabilities that we can take advantage of within the CBERS and the AFWERX framework that is available to us.
Great, thank you. So I know we're coming up on time in just a couple of minutes. I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. And I would just like to say that you're getting lots of thanks on our chat feature for just spending so much time answering questions and your detailed responses. But wanted to turn to a question from Paul regarding the Air Force Research Lab. So Paul says that he agrees with the plan to keep AFRL as an integrated organization, but would like to hear more about how Space Force and the Space System Command will work with AFRL to make sure that AFRL addresses space needs.
Oh, that's a great question, Paul. I think that we're in a really good place. We have a phenomenal partnership with Air Force Research Lab, with our Air Force Materiel Command partners on the Air Force side. I think we're off to a great start with regards to a lab community that recognizes how critical future technologies and future capabilities for space are, and will continue to invest in ensuring that we continue to advance and benefit from that expertise and that lab infrastructure. As you know, we have our Sensors Directorate under Air Force Research Lab that has been focused on space for quite some time. And with the stand-up of the new service, that infrastructure, I think, will continue to be a primary partner to us and will continue to work closely with us on a daily basis, and looking at our long-term challenges and our short-term challenges. But having said that, you know, we benefit as well from the larger Air Force Research Lab set of efforts that are going on. There are technologies and areas of focus that both the Air Force and the Space Force are interested in and want to continue to advance. The advancement of artificial intelligence and machine learning, the advancement of software-defined networks, for example, are 2 areas that that we are looking to Air Force Research Lab writ large to continue to bring us new capabilities in. So having that partnership with Air Force Research Lab gives us that access and that larger benefit, while we continue to work very closely with our Sensors Directorate and the more traditional focus on some of the space technologies that we'll want to take advantage of.
Great, thank you. So question here from Steve. What are the plans for a U.S. Space Force Reserve?
Well, that's right in my wheelhouse too. So with my other hat on, as the mobilization assistant to the Chief of Space Operations, I'm responsible for the current reserve workforce and ensuring that our reserve workforce is ready and available to support the space missions. There's a lot of study work going on that is looking at the future of a Space Force Reserve and what that might entail. The NDAA that established the Space Force last year specifically said that we would wait on a decision or on a follow-up legislative proposal, I should say, that would speak to a future reserve capability for a Space Force. And there's any number of things that are being looked at. So it's really still being discussed and studied. It's unclear whether or not we need a separate independent Space Force Reserve. That's certainly one of the options. Whether or not we maintain the current construct of the Air Force providing reserve support to the space service, or other ways of looking at what they call a single component service, where it would be one component with full-time and part-time participation. So there's lots of different options being considered, and that work will continue to go on here for a bit before a legislative proposal is brought forward by the SecDef, and then will evolve into a future construct. As it stands right now, though, my focus is to ensure that our space reserve units, that our Air Force reserve units supporting space missions can continue to conduct their missions effectively and continue to deliver phenomenal talent from the reserve component to all the space missions that we support. And I see no reason to change that ability until we get a future decision. We are ready, and we are connected, and we are associated and aligned with our deltas and delivering capability every single day.
Wonderful, thank you. So one last question before we wrap up here. So I know that diversity is a critical issue for you. You talked about on a webinar yesterday how critical it is to the Space Force, especially as they're standing up this new service and looking at new ways of doing things. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, as that's a particular key issue for both AIAA and the Ascend event series?
I'm sorry, you just broke up there at the end, Toby. What?
Sorry, if you can tell us a little bit more about diversity and how you see it as critical for the Space Force.
Yep. Yes, diversity. Diversity is a topic that certainly has been brought to the fore, and it's been a topic of interest and critical attention for quite some time. As a service, as a member of the armed services, I would say that we're all very focused on the importance of a diverse set of perspectives, a diverse talent base, a diverse team that can be brought to bear to address our most critical challenges. So within the Space Force, it's no different. As we stand up this organization from the start, we recognize that we want to attract a diverse pool of individuals so that we can maximize insights, perspectives, experiences, backgrounds from all different facets. Because in order for us to be competitive, to remain competitive, to get ahead of the threat and stay ahead of the threat, as I said earlier, it's not just about technology, it's about people. And people, every person brings a different kind of a perspective. And so we need as many diverse perspectives as we can take in, and we need to continue to cultivate diversity within our organization, not just in how we recruit and who we recruit, but how we develop our talent, and how we provide opportunities to folks, and how we grow our force across our human capital dimension. So I would say that as a new service, we have an opportunity to take a look at all kinds of areas from a technology standpoint, from a process standpoint, and from a human capital standpoint to ensure that we've got diversity built in across the board, and that we take advantage of diversity, we leverage diversity and all that it can bring us to maximize our overall capability set.
Wonderful, thank you. I think that's a perfect ending for this discussion. So General Kreider, thank you for your service, and thank you so much for your time and your insight today, especially all the time that you've taken to answer our audience questions. I have pages of notes, and I can't wait to go back and start Googling some of this information and getting more insight. So thank you very much. To our audience, thank you for your great questions, and I encourage you to keep them coming. We are going to take a quick break, but be sure to join us back here at 11:45 in Track 5, which is the National Security Track. We're going to hear from John Gaylor and Pam Melroy on Space Force and Space Command, myths, opportunities, and technologies. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.